Okay, good evening, everyone. I would like to get started here this night. I'd like to welcome you all. We have two meetings back to back. We'll be starting off with our Committee of the Whole meeting. Once that meeting adjourns, then we'll take a short break and then move into the special council meeting. So I'm just looking at the cover page for tonight's Committee of the Whole, and there's just a correction that I need, and it says that the agenda for May 1st, 2017 special meeting of council should read Committee of the Whole be adopted as circulated. So I'd like to have that approved by council, please. Moved by Councillor Casper and seconded by Councillor Pearson. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, we do have a delegation item 4.1. There'd be a 5-minute presentation from Mook Marine Energy Production Limited. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Peter Mook up to the front, please. And if you could please just turn on your microphone just so we can hear you, we'll get started. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and all the attending committees. I do wish you greetings from Mook Marine Energy Productions. I would like to start with going over the actual definitions that take place and being used in the Illuminate the Way Independent Energy Infrastructure Upgrade. The first definition would be that of independent energy, which is a fuelless, emissionless source of continuous renewable energy, which is based off the principles of natural rotary electromagnetics, plasma, zero-point energy, and geometric energy. A reference to that would be pyramid energy and things like that. The next definition would be that of independent energy devices, which also is a fuelless, emissionless source of continuous renewable energy that requires no continued external input to... There we go. That is a fuelless, emissionless source of continuous renewable energy that requires no continued external input to operate. These devices are based off of the principles of natural electromagnetics, plasma, zero-point energy, and geometric energy. They're not prone for disruption from external factors and maintenance issues, and are capable of energy production 24/7, 365 days a year. These devices can be utilized as a passive income generator based off of true energy consciousness and power generating capabilities in the right environment with the right legislation set up. The definition of advanced smart energy management system is a military or higher grade of system capable of handling extreme environments, including submersible, temperature resistance range from minus 60 degrees Celsius to 120 degrees Celsius. It's integratable with any existing alternative energy and independent energy sources, including all types of battery formats with multiple programmable modes such as grid tie-off, off-grid, grid interactive, net metering, etc., as well as a secured monitoring, analytical, and management program accessible via the internet connection on any device. Now, the last one is the Illuminate the Way Independent Energy Infrastructure Upgrade, which pretty much sets everything in motion. It is a 2-phase instruction manual to establish a no-cost, smooth flow, assembly line-like, seamless integration of independent energy devices and advanced smart energy management systems into the infrastructure, as well as the rules, regulations, policies, and benchmarks that are also set forth in it to do it. And now, additionally, what we're seeking from the last time I was here is the written letter of support for the to start out with the Illuminate the Way Independent Energy Infrastructure Upgrade Municipal Movement, which will set the standpoint so that it can proceed further into that program. Now, if we need to, I know I already sent you guys the revised copy of the municipal movement, and if we need to go over that again, we can, but initially the letter of support really cements everything. Now, what I'd just like to do is show you here is actually what that letter of support will actually do is create a base value in the billions for the actual copyrights of all these definitions. That's what sets it all in stage. And the one thing that happens is that it creates a protection for us so that it cannot be impeded by even the federal government. It'll all be set forth with those definitions, and it also separates the energies. So you hear the word free energy slammed around a lot. There's always contextual meaning. Is it free space energy, or is it like space, like an actual grammatical space, or is it free dash energy? And now both those have different meanings. Free Dash Energy is creating a system that performs work. That's an automobile, that's us, that's a bicycle. So, and then there's alternative energy, which generally just covers solar, wind, tidal, geothermal, and a few bases into plasma, just like the plasma reactor on the mainland. It's still in its infancy, but it also is an independent energy because it requires fuel. Even though it's hydrogen and in abundance, it still requires fuel. Now, upon that continuation of the letter of support, it allows us to take these, set the stage, and then continue on and provide that no-cost infrastructure upgrade. So that means the municipality, like for the municipality service buildings, including the town hall here, the RCMP and everybody will receive the upgrade, as well as the homeowners and the commercial and industrial sectors of Souk here. The very basis part of the municipal movement actually bolsters the residential sector by allowing the upon pushing acquisition and change of policy from BC Assessment to do it, it'll create a $30,000 to $60,000 worth of equity, tax-free and exempt, from also tax-free from sale, so that that added equity will not be taxed upon sale of the property, nor will it be taxed even on property tax due to a just compensation because of the massive benefits that these technologies allow. And so the other beneficial thing is that it'll be creating localized electricity generation communities, which initially, in the end, will actually open a free market for electricity where it will not be held in monopolized control, so that the municipalities will actually be their own entity, where they do not have to rely on external sources, especially one as critical as electricity in this day and age. And that will open up a whole new market where the municipalities can actually set the rates within limits of what they would like to sell to BC Hydro, and BC Hydro would go back to doing what they're originally founded for, which was the export of energy. So it'll be a really easy switch for them. So yeah, we're just here again to request the written letter, and we'd like to proceed with business and help out the municipality. And of course, also upon that written letter, it also adds that great momentum that is needed for all the other municipalities to follow suit, as well as the First Nations. I will be doing my rounds with all the tribal chiefs in the region here for the Southern Island, and we'll be talking with them to get additional letters of support showing that they're ready to be involved with this. And we would like to provide Souk the first opportunity with the initiative and help spark the much-needed change by adopting the policies mentioned above in the municipal movement, as it will provide an immediate difference. This isn't a 5-year or 10-year plan. This, upon the letter of support, it'll actually take less than a year for Souk to actually receive its independent energy infrastructure upgrade, which would mean stability to the residential sectors, stability to commercial, but it's always residential first, commercial, industrial, and then the marine aspect of it, which we are already working on now, using advanced technologies in that as well. Also, it'll provide the much-needed ignition of the hearts and minds of the citizens of the municipality. And that's pretty much everything we got today, and we'd just like to go over if there's any questions that you guys might have about the definitions or the municipal movements. Please let me know, as I can answer them all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mook. Thank you for your presentation. Any questions or comments from councillors? Councillor Pearson?
Yeah. So is these definitions, they're available online, or you're going to be able to send them to us?
I already actually have
some of them, yeah, but not everything you talked about tonight, right?
Well, actually, these definitions are the ones that are present in the Illuminate the Way Independent Energy Infrastructure Upgrade, and they're the basis that we'll be operating on.
Okay.
So that actually protects everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments from councillors? Okay, so the delegation is requesting a letter of support for the protection of the definitions?
No, that's already protected because of the copyrights. What we're looking for is a letter of support for the Illuminate the Way Independent Energy Infrastructure Upgrade, as well as Milk Marine Energy Productions Limited.
Okay, because I think well, in order to do something like that, like there would have to be a little bit more, I think, contractually to protect the district. I'm thinking of whenever a service provider is, I'm using as an example, has run or installed a new form of technology and it falls on municipal right-of-way and the like, there has to be sort of a contractual agreement with the municipality that's vetted through the offices.
Yes.
So I don't know that with what the information we have so far that we could just sign off our infrastructure.
Well, it's not necessarily signing off the infrastructure, because what happens with this is that mainly the infrastructure upgrade takes place at the residential level. So that's in the actual home itself. And
Okay.
because all the infrastructure, like the power lines and everything, they are not really burdened because all those lines are static, so they can go either way. The reason why there's grounds connected to that is because there's not enough demand on the lines to actually make them travel down the lines. That's what the grounds do, is pull that energy using the Earth's magnetic field along the lines to where it's demanded. So what this does is actually changes the flow of electricity, so it actually goes back out and instead of coming in. And it starts with the home, so there is actual no major infrastructure changes that take place. It all
Okay,
happens
I might
in the
have
home.
phrased that, but I guess I don't understand what's being proposed. I'm sorry.
Oh well, it's
Nobody has any questions, you see?
Councillor
Yeah.
Casper, excuse me, we're having a meeting and we're trying to listen, so please don't interrupt. Councillor Casper?
So I'm just going to throw out a suggestion that perhaps council in turn can have discussions with our staff, and if need be, our solicitor on what's being requested, to make sure that that the district's interest is protected and we're not putting ourselves in a difficult position. So that's what I would so move.
Okay. So there's a motion by Councillor Casper that's been seconded by Councillor Pearson. Did our staff catch the motion?
Your Worship, it would be probably a recommendation to council, since we're in the committee of the whole
Yes.
structure right now.
That's right, a recommendation to council. Okay?
excellent. And,
And,
what does that totally entail? Let me just ask.
Staff is just going to review and vet the information that you've provided and put
Excellent.
it into a report for us for further
Analysis.
analysis and review.
Exactly. Perfect.
Okay. At a regular council meeting as we're sitting in committee of the whole.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Perfect. That sounds excellent.
Okay?
We'll, of course, have more discussions on this as well. I'll come back as many times as needed.
Okay, so any further comments on the motion by council? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, thank you very
Excellent.
much.
Thank you. I hope you all have yourself a wonderful evening.
Okay, thank you
Enjoy
very
your
much,
great
Mr.
evening.
Luke. Okay, next up on our agenda is Telus Mural. Our chair from the former Arts Committee is here as well to speak to this matter and to provide some information. This item came forward out of the Arts Committee when it existed, and just in the interim, it made sense that these sort of items that are outstanding from committees come to committee of the whole. So welcome, Mr. Johnston. We do have the report, but perhaps if you could speak to it, that would be great.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that the matter has come back before council. During the Communities in Bloom judges going around last summer, they had commented that they asked what this nondescript white building was on Souk Road between the CIBC and the dental building was, and we told them it really wasn't kind of a public building. It was just TELUS, so we were very cognizant that it wasn't looking its best. But we had a meeting with the Mr. Lawson, the area manager for TELUS, in the summer, late fall, and at that time we proposed that a mural be painted on the building, and they were quite receptive to it. Apparently TELUS has done this to some of their buildings in the past with other municipalities, notably Sydney, I believe you mentioned. So we had proposed a theme called Art and Adventure, and to feature all the kind of the outdoor activities around Souk, everything from the potholes, the zip line, to fishing and so forth. And they thought that would fit very well with their theme, which is the future is friendly. We had proposed something colorful, youthful, future-oriented, and They were very receptive to that, and the fellow had just asked for a proposal that he could show his bosses, and he said yes, they'd probably be willing to pay for the entire cost of this, but however, as it approached $10,000, then he would need approval from his superiors, and it may take some advance budgeting on their part. So we did prepare the proposal, and we hadn't sent it to the fellow. We had sent it, of course, to the district first for their approval, and drafted a draft letter to Mr. Lawson, suggesting that the proposal and detailing it, the size, the height. We went out and inspected the building. We talked to the chair of the Chemainus Mural Society there about potential costs. We talked to a few artists, mural artists from Victoria about potential costs. And when we inspected the building, it needs a power wash, a little bit of patching, but the surface is good to do it. And we also suggested that they do it in a kind of a trompe-l'oeil effect where the ground merges with the mural. So just as you have river rock and we have seagrasses and so forth downtown, that could be the front yard of the TELUS building there, and it would merge into the mural and probably create a pretty neat effect. I don't know if people have been downtown Victoria. There's a place on Langley near Bastion Square where they've got the side of a building and people peeking out. It's that kind of fun kind of approach. So they're very receptive to it. We put together the proposal, the draft letter. What we suggested was they would pay for the full cost of it, which we estimated about $10,000. What the onus on the district would be to host the call for artists and the competition. We had suggested that we narrow it down to 3 to 5 people for them, and they make the final decision. So we thought at the time that would also make potentially a good 150th anniversary project in town here as well. So that's where it sits. It's I guess it's the draft letter is there, the one-page proposal that they were seeking is there, and if council wishes, they could move forward with it with TELUS. I'm not sure about their budget timing, process now, and especially since the costs are approaching $10,000. I'm not sure if it's too late for this year or not, but it's still worth pursuing.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation and for following up with this. Councillor Pearson?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Johnson. I would be prepared to make a recommendation that it go to regular council meeting for consideration and moving forward with the proposal.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Berger. Yes, we can have this go through to our staff, it'll go to regular council meeting, and then at that point, if maybe staff at that time could just comment just on what would be needed to actually host. I mean, I think all our part would be is to host the actual competition. To get 3, I think is a good number as well. And then I read in here if it's TELUS's building, so they could have the final pick on the design. I'm fairly certain that we cannot contribute any cost to the mural, even if it went over, because it's a privately held building. We can only do murals on our own property, would be my understanding. I'm getting nods from staff, but
and
perhaps,
the scope of it could be pared back if it doesn't to be less than 10,000.
Yes,
because we had suggested 3 sides. You can scale back the 2 sides that aren't as visible as the front. So there are some cost savings potentially there.
So for what you've looked at is the side facing Souk Road, and then
yes,
potentially
and the 2
around.
sides, one on the bank side and one on the dental office side,
right.
Partially on each side, at the front that's most visible, so it would wrap around. But you could scale back the sides of it as well to save money.
Okay. Are there any other further comments or questions from council? I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? So we'll see this at the upcoming regular council meeting, and thank you very much for your time, Mr. Johnston. Okay, next is item 3, West Coast Road. We have a delegation from Ms. Stephanie Davidson. Thank you very much for coming, and just turn on your microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. So, my name is Stephanie Davidson. I represent a landowner in Souk here that has 2 parcels of agricultural land reserve land, and he intends to apply to have them excluded from the land reserve, and he's seeking support from mayor and council in order to do this. He's in a pretty unique situation here where he's actually able to, if he's successful in his exclusion of these lands, he's able to apply for an inclusion of over 28 acres out in Kemp Lake, which would add over 12.5 acres of agricultural land to the community, and it is better quality farmland. It's the lands that I speak of that we're going to apply for exclusion are marginal poor quality lands. I recently actually had a site visit with an agrologist that works with the Ministry of Agriculture, and he agreed with one parcel in particular. That's the one that seems to be the most the point of contention here in Souk, which is the one that backs up onto Tammany Road. He agreed that parcel should be removed from the reserve because what's happened is it has always been marginal land. At one time it may have been salvageable, but because of the development that's happened on Tammany, it's an elevated development and it's causing runoff, and there wasn't proper easements put in, and it is perpetually damaging the soil. And when it comes to agricultural land and going before the Land Commission, which I've done before in the past, and when it comes to judicial review, it all comes down to, is the cost of remediation prohibitive? And it most certainly is on that particular parcel. Now, the other parcel in question is a 10-acre parcel. Over 5 of it is industrial. It always has been industrial. It had a logging company on it. It currently has an automotive shop on it. It is concrete and gravel. The other 5 acres are a hay field. Now, what's happened is that one is hard pan conglomerate, which means that you can't get the proper drainage in. The cost of improving, it's not sustainable. It's perpetually needing to be improved. So you have this 5-acre parcel, and only 2 acres of it is actually producing sellable hay. So both properties are unable to make their gate sales. Both properties have hard pan conglomerate, which means that you can improve all you want. It's just going to keep damaging, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. So, and they are centrally located. So the landowner that I represent, what he would like to see is he'd like to see support from mayor and council to have these lands removed from the reserve. And in exchange, as I say, or as a good faith gesture, he'd like to include over 28 acres in Kemp Lake. And he also is in a position where he can look at a donation of up to 2 acres of land. He has never at any point specified to me what zoning he would like to see for these lands. He would like me to work cooperatively with mayor and council to find out what the community needs. If it's a hospital, he'd like to see land earmarked for a hospital. If it's affordable housing, he'd like to see that. If they want a park, that can happen as well. He wants me to work with mayor and council in order to make these core lands, these centrally located lands, usable for the community because they are not usable for farming. Now, what's happening here is there is a new tax reform that the BC government is trying to put in place that is going to further penalize people that have ALR lands if they cannot make their gate sales, if they're not farming. This land cannot be cultivated. This land cannot have above ground farming on it because it's a swamp. The landowner was looking at putting in cattle. He was looking at putting in a feedlot, and that still may be the case if the land doesn't come out because he has to be able to farm it, or he will be penalized. Right now, he is paying residential taxes on it because he's been unable to farm it. And as I say, if this reform goes through, he will be further penalized. Now, the agrologist, I should be honest with you, when I met with him, he said it's much more suitable for pigs because it's not even suitable for cattle. So I'm looking for support from mayor and council. I would strongly advise mayor and council to either come and take a look at the lands themselves, do a site survey, have staff come, have your engineers come out, take a look. Do you have any questions?
Okay, thank you very much for attending. I do have a question through to our staff. Question is on the process with applications to the Land Commission. So my understanding from last year when we had a presentation was that anyone that's interested in applying would submit to the Land Commission, and then the Land Commission would refer back to a council at a later date. So in terms of process,
may I speak to that, Mayor?
I'm actually directing this to staff first.
Okay, go for it.
Your Worship, the process for exclusion is, as you say, the exclusion application is sent directly to the Land Commission. At one time, it came here and then came to the municipality and was forwarded to the Land Commission. But now exclusion applications are made directly to the Land Commission.
And do they send them all back to?
My understanding is the way the process works, and we haven't had one for a while, but my understanding is they can deliberate on the application themselves and either decide to forward it on to the appropriate municipality for comment and input, or deal with it, reject it right then and there. That is my understanding.
My understanding, because I spoke with the Land
no,
Commission
she-
within the
Go
last
ahead.
few weeks, is they said that with the application, yes, it's the landowner that applies, but they would like any supporting documents to go with the application. Support from local government, support from municipality, expert opinion. They want that to go with the application. They don't want it after the fact. They said that way they can look at all the facts while they're there, and then they can consult the district. They were very clear with me. They said any supporting documents that I can send with the application, it's better to have it then and not after the fact.
Okay, well, we can get clarity on that. Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. Within our first term of council, I believe that we wrote 2 letters, one for certain, but I think 2 on behalf of exclusion with this parcel.
That was an application that was done by another landowner, and that was done for Brooks Road, for 1841 Brooks Road, I do believe, 7096 West Coast Road. And because all 3 parcels of land attached, the landowner asked this particular landowner that I'm referring to, well, do you want us to just include yours in as well? Now we're looking at 5 acres, just 5 acres separately. And then the other parcel that's 10 acres has never been applied for. And it also, you have to take into consideration the fact that it's a completely new land commission over there. They were very clear with me on the phone. They said that they're looking at things with new, fresh eyes. They have more staff to come out and do site visits and do their own soil surveys. They absolutely encouraged the application. And as I say, I had an with the Ministry of Agriculture come, and he walked the land, and he said he can't believe that this wasn't considered.
Yes, and if I can just follow up, and I believe we actually had a visit during my first term, so this is going back a few years. We had a visit from someone that did say exactly what you're saying, that the land wouldn't even be suitable for hay for the most part.
Yes, right.
So I'm just wondering, because we're sitting as a committee, we can't make any final decisions this evening, but I'm wondering if we can send direction back to staff just to get clarity on what was done previously, because there obviously is a few addresses, but I know that past councils have sent support before.
You have to understand the original...
Excuse me, can the councillor finish her comment, please?
Sorry, I just been saying it would be interesting I would like to see the information that happened before and where that went before and what had happened. I completely understand that there's new landowners and a new commission in place. But from my own knowledge, I just want to see sort of where things went before, and then we can revisit the topic.
Okay, are there other comments from members of council? Councillor Casper?
Yeah, philosophically, I don't support any exclusions. And there's a number of other smaller properties that have applications in the past before the commission that their lands were probably in more of a marginal or less of an agricultural productivity state that had been flatly rejected by the ALR. One of the problems that we're facing now is that the Land Commission has not signed off on our official community plan. Plan's been in place since 2010. We're in the process of reviewing designations throughout the community plan. So I think this application is premature. And again, philosophically, on large parcels of land, I cannot support exclusions. Just don't. And I have a bias. I don't apologize for it. But I felt that way for probably...
Excuse me, the councillor is still speaking.
Please don't interrupt me. Okay? I didn't interrupt you.
I apologize. I thought you were finished.
Thank you very much for the apology. And it's our mayor who conducts this meeting. I come with a bias. I don't apologize for that. I have felt that way 30, 35 years through all my political career. And I look at key issues that face people who own agricultural land. And some people have chosen to let their land go to rack and ruin for whatever reason. But that's their choice. I'm not going to criticize them for that. And some have done the utmost to try to keep their properties up to a standard where they can make and encourage their land to be viable. The thing that caught me by surprise, and I felt, in some ways insulted, and I think members of the community felt insulted by this threat of, we're going to turn this property into a feedlot. And to me, that just caused ire and rancor in the community. And some people labeled that as a ploy to have the land removed for fear in neighborhoods. So, I'm not passing judgment on it. People can choose to use the tactics, whatever they so choose, on how to leverage decisions. But I personally don't feel that this council should be pressured to actually give support one way or the other as far as anybody making an application, especially when I hear, and I've seen the emails, where there are these veiled threats of turning it into some feedlot. So, it's reminiscent of another story I heard when yourself, Madam Mayor, and Councillor Berger were on council, where there was going to be a fish farm, and it was going to create all kinds of smells, and that caused some rancor amongst the taxpayers, and basically got council to start making some decisions that perhaps, that's their decision. But if I was there, I would never have supported. So, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Councillor Casper. Councillor Pearson?
Well, I think that some of the things that are facing us, that are challenges, we have an OCP, and there is some missing pieces to it. Our official agricultural bank, I guess, is missing for us. We have an infrastructure that surrounds that property. The pressure is going to come on us as a community, whether we like it or whether we don't like it. The pressure is going to come on to be looking at all properties within. We have an infrastructure that surrounds the properties and the properties that we're talking about. But not only those properties, there's some big tracts of land that to the west and to the east of this property that will have immense pressure from a development point of view. So I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that our OCP matches, because we're going to get more applications from more people and more landowners as the pressure comes on us to develop our, what I call almost town core. And it's not our town core, but it's very close in, surrounded by infrastructure. Our sewer, our roads, our network is surrounding these properties. So again, it's a challenge. There's going to be people who are going to come forward with applications, but I want to make sure that our OCP supports our direction of what we want as a town, and we've gone through an OCP review, as well as there's landowners who want to take advantage of development. So there's a challenge both ways. We only have to look across the water to the southern part of the interior or the Fraser Valley to see what pressures have been on agricultural land, and which is a lot better agricultural land as far as I'm concerned, and it's been removed. So I think we have to make sure that we review our OCP, and then we have to look at applications one at a time. But again, we have to identify where our growth's going to go, because we're going to have that pressure on us.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ray?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The way I look at it is there's a process for applicants to have removal of their AL land out of the reserve, and I support and being open to that process. So I don't have a problem. I'd like, as Councillor Berger said, I'd like the information, and I would, it can come to a council meeting, and we can examine it and have the facts and the reports that we need to make a decision. I'm not at this time prepared to make an opinion either way. I think it's important to get both sides of the matter so that we can consider it at that time. So I would certainly support Councillor Berger's idea of taking it to council with the report.
Okay, so Councillor Berger had suggested getting information on previous applications and outcomes on those. Clarity on the process and our expectations, I think, with the new ALC, because I'm just going on what the ALC said in this chambers when they presented to us a year ago. And then I'm hearing something different here, so I think we just need to confirm and clarify that. And then in terms of what you spoke of, Ms. Davidson, it's basically the one page that's with your delegation form. So if there was other matters, as you spoke of this evening, any reports from an agrichologist or whatever, perhaps you can forward those on to staff, and then they could be a part of this. That would give council more information and more materials to look at.
Okay.
So looking for a motion then from... Okay, so that has been moved by Councillor Casper and seconded by Councillor Pearson. Committee of the Whole recommending to Council to receive information on previous applications and the outcomes, the expectations from the Agricultural Land Commission, and whatever additional information Ms. Davidson can apply at an upcoming council meeting. Okay, is that clear? Councillor Pearson, then Ray?
Well, and I support the motion the way it's made, but I also think that we have to consider whether we're going to support the application. I'm not sure what the process is. I'd like to understand that, but I'd like that to be debated at a regular council meeting.
Yeah, well, that's where, when it comes to the regular meeting, we would have more of those materials, and could council decide at that point how they would like to proceed.
Thank you.
Councillor Ray.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I'm going to come back to Councillor Pearson's comment about matching it up with the ag plan. So perhaps when it comes back before council, we can have some sense of where that agricultural plan is and where we are with the OCP. Because as Councillor Pearson points out, that's a piece of the decision making.
Yeah.
So we may, I guess what I'm saying is come before council, but we may not be at a point where we can actually make a decision. It may have to be deferred possibly. So I just raised that in terms of expectations.
Yes, we are in the middle of an OCP review, and as Councillor Casper, I believe, said, the Agricultural Land Commission did not sign off on the last OCP that we had. That's been in place since 2010, and we're doing a review and an update right now. We took a bit of a break from it to focus on our budget, and now we've picked it up, and this is the first evening that we're back getting into that. So that's where we'll just have to see what the timing is like at that moment. Okay?
Just one quick question, if you don't mind. Given the fact that you're working on the ag plan with the OCP, and this proposal would in fact put 28 acres into the reserve that they sit between two other ALR parcels, would you at any point want staff to come out and do site visits to these parcels?
Well, the 20, as you said, though, the 28 acres is not within our own boundary, though.
Well, it's out in Kemp Lake.
We still have no jurisdiction over what occurs in the other outlying areas. We can only focus on what occurs within our own municipal boundaries.
Okay.
But that is something that our staff will take into consideration.
Okay.
Okay. I did note on this agenda there is public input to follow each item. So before I call the question on the motion, I'd just like to invite anyone from the public to comment. Sorry, Ms. Davidson, if you don't mind just having a seat in the audience, just so that I can allow members of the public to come forward.
I'm sorry, can I say one more quick thing? I just wanted to mention that the feedlot, putting the feedlot on, that was not a veiled threat. That was simply looking at some way of farming the land in order to make gate sales. And as far as the landowner not keeping up his land, the land is being damaged by the development on Tominey, and if anybody were to come out and take a look at it, they would clearly see that it wasn't lack of a work on his part. It was the development. It should never have happened the way it did. It's an elevated development, and it causes perpetual runoff. I just think that should be known. It was not the landowner that I represent is a good man, and he is pro-agriculture, and I think that should be noted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Howitt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for a point of clarity, what we are doing is we're reviewing a refresh for the OCP at this point in time. We are not reviewing the existing ag plan at this point.
Thank you for clarifying that. We do have an ag plan that's been adopted that is in place right now. It is the OCP that we're just focused on. Okay.
Thank you. I was going to remind you that it was public input. There's a few things.
Sorry, Ms. Lures. I just
You need
your name.
5526 Suk Road, Ellen Lord. So, again, what you said was correct. The Kemp Lake property is not in the district, so it's not something that we can even be discussing. The proposal for this land saying that it's marginal, etc., all land is marginal. All land has to be perpetually maintained and cared for. As a farmer, from the prairies, that all land has to be perpetually maintained. I would, as far as the development on Tammany, there is in our bylaws we have that people who are developing and there needs to be remediation done by that developer in Tammany if he is in fact affecting ALR land. That's not allowed, as ALC Commission says. And to remove any land, most of the land that's being farmed actually is not in the ALR, but that land, it doesn't matter. It's been remediated to become farmable, to grow. Hay is one of our biggest problems to keep hay growing. I get hay have been getting hay from that farm. And to get hay is really more and more difficult because the land is being developed and flat land is being developed. It's a real problem because you can't hay on rocks and grow hay on rocks and mountains and things like that. That's where you should develop. But again, it shouldn't be that development shouldn't be affecting the farms. There's two parcels there, the 10-acre and the one that's been used as industrial. When we did the OCP initially, the discussion was around agricultural land, ALR land, and in all agricultural land, and allowing that land to be able to make a proper income, but not destroy the land. So there's other things. Yes, you could have some 1-acre industrial, for instance, as a temporary permit, I believe, or something like that. You can do different things to try to get a better cash flow because there is no cash flow in farming. So allowing different little things to happen that can give some income to that farm or to that land. And feedlot, as far as a feedlot goes, that is the most damaging thing to do to any property, because when you have a feedlot and you have animals close like that, you've got antibiotics and on swampland, it's just not possible. The cows' hooves would be rotting. It's just not a very. I mean, to even suggest that's not very responsible, in my opinion. Other than that, also I wanted to go back to the TELUS property as well, because I remember when that came forward, the TELUS people came forward and asked to put another, what do they call those, antennas up on their property. And the big thing that was pushed was that they were going to remediate their land and make it all beautiful and et cetera, and it's still ugly. So yes, I would hope that that TELUS actually comes through with what they said they would do at that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lures. I just see someone coming to the microphone if you want to speak after her.
Gail Hall, 2517 Suk River Road. And thank you for the opportunity. I just want to make sure that everybody knows why the Land Commission has not signed off on the OCP. Do we all know? I do. It's because on this very property, there was a circle drawn, and I think it's a technical learning center or something like that was put there. And the Land Commission said from the beginning, until that's gone, we won't sign off. So let's not blame them. It was us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Sorry, if you...
I live at 6744 Air Road. I have a question for everybody in the room. And it is, has anybody ever watched a 16-minute video on YouTube called Cowspiracy? Anybody? So nobody has watched this video. I watched it yesterday. So I really would ask somebody on the council to take the job on of watching that 16-minute video called Cowspiracy. And you'll know why we don't want any more lots and farming. You know what? I won't go into it, but I'm telling you, once somebody on this council watches that video, you'll know something serious is up. Can I comment on something that was said last meeting? No? Okay. Okay, well that's it. Please. Cowspiracy.
Thank you, Mr. Dugan. We can look that up. Are there other speakers this evening for any items on tonight's agenda? I'll call again for this public input after when we get to the OCP. If you'd come on forward, please. There'll be another opportunity on item 5 as well. Sorry, sir. Could you please turn on the microphone? Thank you.
Kenneth Canavan, 6220 Calvert Road. I'm a little concerned about some of the comments that I heard tonight in reference to the removal of a certain piece of property from the agricultural land reserve. Not so much that Councillor Casper was totally against it. Councillor Pearson obviously is totally against it. I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with is, does the Land Commission ever get in touch with yourself or any members of the council and ask about these particular pieces of property?
No, as stated earlier, it's only when items actually get referred out. I can't think of a time.
So I'll rephrase the question then. Has anybody here on council ever been phoned by a member of the Land Commission and just said, hey, what's going on out there with this piece of property? Nobody? Why is council so afraid to...
Councillor Casper would like to respond to your question.
In I think it was 2012 or 13, the council of the day had a meeting with the Land Commission, and they actually had the big map, and they actually identified the large tracts of land and large acreages that they were very abundantly clear about that would not be removed.
That's got nothing to do with my question, Councillor Casper.
No, I'm just talking.
I'd like the councillor to answer.
So I just want to finish. So there was fairly extensive discussions about the role of the commission, what they do, and what their sort of view is about large tracts of land. Because they said that the hardest thing that happens in British Columbia is having large tracts of land that are intact to remain within the ALR. They looked and do look favorably on including more land and releasing land, but they talked about pieces of land that are small, isolated parcels that are separated from other and are completely and utterly surrounded by very active uses. You know, we had a huge discussion with them, and it wasn't a public meeting. It was just a meeting with the commission, the island members of the commission of the day. So I think all of us who were elected at that time participated in that meeting. So there have been discussions with...
No, I fully understand that, Councillor Casper, and I appreciate your information on it. That had nothing to do with the question that I'm asking. And the question I'm asking is that when a person comes with an application, whether I'm in favor of the application or not, it's here and there. I just don't like the way that I see it being presented. I think that council should have an open mind when a person comes with an application, the same as anybody else, to erect a building in the municipality that would be a little bit different from something else, and to have an open mind at it and say, okay, fine, listen to it, and and say, hey, let's talk about it, because maybe that particular piece of property, I don't know. I'm familiar with the property because I hay right beside it. We used to hay there at one time. And again, there's no money in haying. There's no money in anything to do with farming. It's just something that you do, okay? People that have 5 acres are lucky to make $1,500 a year after they pay for it and get it cut. So you can't live on $1,500. That's a fact, because I cut most of the hay in the Souk area. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that it feels very unfair for a person that comes here and to council, and Councillor Casper gave a great oral presentation of how he's ticked off for the last 35 years, and that's fine. That's his opinion. And Councillor Pearson didn't give the impression that he was in favor of it either. But I think that's the wrong thing to give the people that come forth here, and they're not used to speaking to members of council, and have an open mind and say, okay, good point from Councillor Berger said, let's look at it. Councillor Ray said, let's look at it. And I think that what council's job is to do, is to look at these things and say, okay, it's a request from a member that pays taxes here, and I just think that they get stonewalled when you get that kind of an answer. And that's just my point.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ipps-Canavan.
You're welcome.
For clarity, council is asking for more information to make
I
an
realize
informed
that.
decision.
I realize that, Madam Mayor, but there was quite a strong statement from Councillor Casper about how he would never endorse anything like that, and because it goes back almost 30 years. And I don't know if that's the right thing to say to a person that's paying taxes and actually keeps this place going. I mean, they're taxpayers. They have the right to get the same thing as the person that comes in and says, oh, I want to erect a sign or do this and that, to be listened to and have a fair look at it. And, maybe council might want to change in the future. It might want to change and say, hey, maybe we should, 35 years ago, as Councillor Casper said, or 30 years ago, maybe now is the time to look at it a little bit different and say, hey, we're going to have a look at it as a member of council that's responsible to the taxpayers of the community, and say, maybe it's time that we did look at it.
Yeah,
that's my point.
And I think that's the direction, that's sort of what I'm hearing council wants to go with. Councillor Casper is a wealth of experience, which we appreciate, and he's...
And no one said he wasn't.
I know, he's sharing his opinion, which we all listen to.
That's fine. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Councillor Pearson, did you want to...
No, I just wanted to respond. I'm going to articulate, I'm going to practice my articulation, because that was the exact opposite interpretation of what I was trying to put across there. So, anyways, I'll practice my articulation. Sorry that took that. Sorry that you took that interpretation. Sorry.
Okay. Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment on this? We do have a motion on the floor, and we'll be expecting further conversations on this matter at an upcoming council meeting. At this point, it will go from committee of the whole to council. Is there anything further from members of council? Okay, seeing none, I'll call a question on the motion then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, thank you. Just going to clear the mic. Just shutting off all the microphones. Okay, so that brings us to item 5, our official community plan review update, and I believe this will be starting off with a staff presentation from our planner. Welcome, and thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I'll just do a quick review of the process that we've undergone to date with the official community plan. Here we go. Am I going in the right direction? Okay. The official community plan is the district's most important planning tool. It helps to influence the way our community grows and develops by guiding how our land is used. Land use and development decisions influence all parts of our daily lives and how our community looks and feels, as well as where we live, work, and play. The OCP must satisfy requirements of provincial legislation and be consistent with the Capital Regional District's regional growth strategy. So back last spring and summer, we began a consultation or engagement process where this is sort of the skeleton of it all. We had and it more or less revolved around visioning. We had about I forget the numbers now, I don't know, about 10 different engagement sessions where people could come to different workshops and provide oral and written feedback. We had stations put up at the library and at the Sea Park for over a week at a time, covering basically all of the topics one would consider within the official community plan. I did a summary report of some of the visioning right before Christmas, which is available online, and we're going to get into that today. And so as of today, we haven't created a draft plan, but we're about where the star is, pulling together feedback from, or ideas from council as to things they think we need to improve with this next version, and combining that with the feedback that I've already received from the community, which includes over 6,000 comments to date. So there's a fair bit there to consider. So the engagement highlights, just to review for those that are new today, included the top 3 reasons that people have chosen to live in Souk include being close to nature in the outdoors, they love the great people in the community, and the affordability. Top 3 goals for the residents. I did a survey that, and there were several opportunities to provide on this, but from some ground-based information, a survey evolved and a number of issues were brought forward and people had to rank them. And so some of the key things that came out of that as far as goals were improving pedestrian connectivity, securing public access to our views and our waterfront and nature, and planning and designing with the environment in mind as 3 key goals for moving forward. There's a draft vision that came out. It's not carved in stone, but it's just sort of trying to be a little more prescriptive than the very long one that exists in the OCP right now. Trying to just get to the point. And people love Souk. They want to protect the environment, celebrate the community, and build the economy. And that we had 12 different key directions that also came out of the process to date. Connecting, having protecting for future generations, designing with green technologies, celebrating the cultures that we have here, considering safety first, embracing community, securing our food, preserving our ecosystems, striving for excellence, being innovative and efficient with our infrastructure, keeping things affordable, and definitely these are not in order, but buying local and creating jobs. This poster is available on the website if you want to go home and read the bullets and get into it more, just so everyone's aware. It's been up for quite a while. Oh, sorry. And so the public themes are in the left-hand column there, and as of January 23rd, I think was our last meeting, it was requested of staff that I meet with each council member individually to sort of have a one-on-one and feel what some of the key improvement areas would be for each of them. And so I did that, and basically there were a list of 17 things that each of the council members brought up. So there were 17 things they could agree upon. And this is the list on the right-hand column. And so I thought it would be interesting just to sort of cross-tabulate it to the public result themes. And really, the OCP will address all of these. But today, because they haven't heard what each other said, we are going to go through each of the items on the right-hand column and sort of do a roundtable discussion where hopefully they can provide some direction and ideas as to where we can make the OCP better for the next round. So today, our roundtable discussion issues are here, and they include partnerships, asset management, a central gathering place, industrial lands, a neighborhood lens, land use designations, walkability/mobility or circulation, town center design, housing form, efficient infrastructure, leadership from the OCP, town center economic vibrancy, sewer infill versus expansion, structure of the OCP itself, economic development and tourism, strategic land acquisitions, and planning tools. So we could probably be here for several days, so hopefully we can hone in on some of the key suggestions and go ahead when you're ready. Oh, maybe, did you want to say something? Rob, I think would like to.
Mr. Howitt had something to add?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to pick up on what Danica said, just to bring some clarification for the public engagement that has taken place, or the public engagement that she put on, is not part of the open public process that we need to go through still, say for the community center, and have that integral public input. Where these impromptu or engagements were not intended to replace those. And the purpose of us coming here tonight is to walk through the 17 items, hopefully quickly, and then ask council for direction, because what we propose to do is from these, just get some clarity from you, pick the ones that you really want to focus in, and then we'll go away and do some land use designations and come back for further direction after that. And from that direction, we will undertake public engagement, the pure public engagement, and also involve our referral agencies as required by law. So I just wanted to clarify those things.
Okay. Councillor Ray?
I'm not sure the process for this part. I'm just a question of point of order. Given what sounds like a very lengthy discussion this evening, are we able to adjourn the recess the Committee of the Whole to go into the regular council meeting? The reason I ask is we have one item on our council agenda that we have. I noticed there are people here tonight to resolve that. To have them sit here for a couple of hours, I'm just wondering if it's possible.
I don't see why not.
Yeah, we could do that, but the only issue with that is we'll not be able to stop the video and go into special and have a separate recording for it. It'll all be amalgamated into one video then, and that's the best that we can do.
It would still be webcast though, so it would all.
Yeah, it'll be live streamed, but when the recording is finished, it'll have to be all as one. We won't be able to stop the recording and then go back into it after. Once it's stopped, it's stopped.
Okay.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So I'll leave it for council. I mean, it's still recorded, and then anyone can forward through to the relevant part as they so desire. I think it's just important that it's webcast, but that does raise a good point. So it's up to council. We can either continue through this and as it was set out initially, or if you like, we can recess this and go to special council. So I'm open to that as well.
I'll move we recess to address the special council meeting as outlined in the council agenda.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Berger. Okay, so there'll be a motion to recess and we'll head into special council. Any other comments from council on the motion? Councillor Pearson? Just microphone.
Well, from a recording point of view, I guess, is it going to show on our website that there's a time? Because I know that you have breaks in that video.
Just because they're two separate meetings, but what we can do is we can place card it somehow to let people know that at this point in the video it's went into special. Okay. It's still live streaming right now as we're speaking, but just for the recording for the end result.
It's more for archiving, like when you go back and you want to see something, it would be that, there's no video for the special council meeting, but then we could put a note on the website that special council meeting video would be found within Committee of the Whole of this date, so it's more for archiving. Councillor, but it is being recorded.
And that the minutes will reflect that the other meeting was adjourned and the minutes will start now.
Well, there would be two different sets of minutes. Okay. We would see the Committee of the Whole and then the time that we would recess and then the time that we would reconvene, and then the special council meeting would have its own minutes.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor
Casper?
So the only thing that wouldn't be included is the actual agenda, correct?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Councillor Casper. There would be no way to be able to...
So my suggestion is, as long as staff and everybody is as abundantly clear and give the widest description of what we're talking about, that would be beneficial, I'm sure.
Okay, I'll call the question then on recessing. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Just need a few minutes, I think, to... Okay, thank you, everyone. We will get started on our special council meeting. So I'll call this special council meeting of May the 1st to order, please. There's no new business or supplementary information, so just look for council to approve the agenda as it's presented. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Berger. All those in favor? Opposed, motion's carried. The first item up, item 5, is public input or public question and comment period on this evening's special council item only. There's just the one item. So if anyone has any comment on that, please come forward. There's a 2-minute time limit, and we just need your name and address for the record, please. Okay, and for the sake of the video, it's 6.1, the turf field project.
Gail Hall, 2517 Souk River Road. I just want to, there's a lot of things I need to say about this, but I'm not going to have time, so I won't be able to do it. Just on the back page where it says turf replacement after 10 years use, replacement cost $500,000. I've read a fair bit about these turf fields, and just about every article will tell you that it costs more to get rid of the one you've got than it's going to cost you to put down a new one. And I don't see any allowance there for that. It's extremely hard to get rid of, and you'll find that in pretty near any article that you look at about turf fields. So I think that needs to be looked at. And I would also say at this point that I am totally against the $700,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Are there any other comments or questions from members of the public on item 6.1, the turf field project? I'll call for a second time. Turf field project 6.1 for the special council meeting of May 1st.
Ellen Lors, 5526 Road. I remember the question was asked at one of the meetings about public money going to private property, and I believe staff was going to look into that. I'm just wondering if there's anything to report in regard to that. Is that doable? Can we do that? Can council give public money to private land? Is the question.
Can we get a comment from staff? We've done this by way of grants in the past to different outfits, but with private
It's
property.
just a question.
Yep.
I think that question was out there, and I can't remember what the answer was.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Your Worship. The $700,000 is split between gas tax and playing field reserve funds. The gas tax portion of it has specific reporting requirements that we're going to have to meet. There needs to be an agreement in place with the ultimate recipient, which can be community associations, which in this case is a community association. So that's fine.
Okay. The answer is
Thank
yes.
You.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lors. We're still in public input. Are there any other comments from members of the public? Okay.
Herb Haldane, 3118 CE, Otter Point Road. Keep in mind, I mean, stuff's going to keep coming up from time to time about this private land issue. Community association was started back in the 30s for a reason, because we needed local people to get involved in trying to create lands and community halls and so on and so forth for the community. So they have membership fee process. They have inclusion with everybody who plays sports and gets involved in, at that time was all suit days, and even what Ellen does, you know, with the gardening and everything else. So the community itself puts money in, creates this society, creates this system in place. They buy a bunch of lands, and then they take care of it by volunteering and so on. We can look at it like it's a private land issue, as if there's some developer going to take over these lands, but that's never going to be the case. It's set up so that's impossible for it to ever happen. And one day in the future, I don't know when that'll be, but I'm assuming one day in the future when people stop volunteering for this organization, the district will probably own these lands, and they'll be given over for $1 and so on and so forth, and they'll belong to the municipality. But until these people stop doing this volunteering, I don't think that'll happen. But that will happen one day because more and more people are getting busier and so on. So we need to keep looking at it like for what it is. It's a community organization. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Haldane. Go ahead. Okay, so I'll call for a final time if there's any members of the public that would like to comment on 6.1, the turf field project. Okay, seeing none, we'll move into that particular item. Council, you see there is a recommendation as well as a report provided by our staff. Questions from members of council or staff? Would you like to introduce the report, or is it just as presented?
Yes, Your Worship. I can give a brief overview. We did just report to council on April 10th. And this is really just a bit more. We've had another meeting with the group, the full committee this time, and that was on last Friday. And they are requesting funds at this time, so we thought there is a bit of urgency around this to pay the supplier of the turf field a deposit and not delay things. So we've looked at it as, if we look at the playing field reserve fund versus the gas tax funds definitely require an agreement, and also will with the CRD. So that, playing field funds we could move along a little quicker with, and then get the agreement in place for the rest of the funds. So that's why there's a recommendation in front of you for a partial payment at this time.
Okay, I'll go to council in just a minute here. My understanding with the Capital Regional District's contribution is that those funds are coming through to the district. The district will hold full fiscal accountability for those funds rather than having two different agreements forms. That's correct?
Actually, we will have two separate agreements.
We still will?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, there'll be a tri-party agreement with the CRD.
Okay.
And then there'll be a separate agreement between the district and the community association.
Okay, but sorry, what I meant though is that there isn't a separate one between the CRD and the community association because the funds are coming through to the district. So then this is where with the tripart agreement, we would reply back to the CRD to fulfill any financial or any commitments that they may request.
Yes, so the way the gas tax, we are responsible for reporting. We maintain full responsibility for those funds. Even though there's a different ultimate recipient, we have to do the reporting, and we need to make sure we're going to be able to do that reporting. Otherwise, further funds may be in jeopardy. Same goes for the CRD. So the CRD may ask us to administer their portion for them, but they still need to do the reporting just as we do.
Very good. Okay, we have comments from councillors. Councillor Ray, Casper, then Berger, please.
I thought I'd just move the recommendation for the conversation.
Okay, so the recommendation is moved by Councillor Ray as stated and seconded by Councillor Pearson. So I'll go to Councillor Casper then.
So I think it's important that staff clarify that the $275,000 or $70,000 comes out of the $400,000 playing field reserve fund. And could you just elaborate on the flexibility around that fund?
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Casper. It is in the recommendation that it is the playing field reserve fund that's used, and we would, that's $400,000 fund that's approved in the budget already for this purpose. The playing field reserve fund, by law, I do not have in front of me, but it is for this type of activity. So, and maybe the Director of Development Services may know more about it than me.
Your Worship, through from Mr. Blackhall, yeah, it does give us that flexibility to allow funding to go towards the playing field, even though the playing field is owned by others. It gives us that flexibility.
So if I may, my recollection is that the money could be used to develop a playing field, to acquire, construct, anywhere within the municipality. There were no strings attached as to location, correct?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Casper, that's correct.
Okay. Councillor Berger, please.
Yes, thank you. And just to follow up with Councillor Casper's comment, I loaded up bylaw 608 in front of me, and it says everything that our staff has said as far as the funds were put into that account. It can be used for construction, new playing fields, land acquisition for playing fields, or upgrading the existing playing fields within the district. So I also just wanted to add that I attended a meeting with Mr. Blackhall and the Community Association members on Friday morning, and I was thoroughly impressed with the amount of work that they've put into this. There was a rather large team there of probably 10 to 15 people that all had, a really high stake on what was going on. And I think the professionalism that they're showing with developing this land is outstanding. So I wholeheartedly support the motion.
Okay, anything further from council on this item? It will go to the next regular council meeting. Actually, no, it won't. We're in special council, so this is it. This is your final time to comment on this. The agreement, though, will come at an upcoming meeting. This just has to go for funding purposes. So I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. There's no new business, so no notice of motion. So I'll just call for a motion to, actually it looks like there is a rise and report item from April 24th in camera meeting, and that is that council appoint Brent Blackhall, Chief Financial Officer, as Acting Chief Administrative Officer in the interim absence of Teresa Sullivan, Chief Administrative Officer. So that's a rise and report item. I'll just call for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Ray and seconded by Councillor Berger. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. We'll just take a very brief recess and then go back to our outstanding committee of the whole item, please. Thank you.
No, I know. But the thing is, it's the bylaw. I know. Like that. The bylaw is very specific. The thing is the bylaw, or the agreement was predicated on the bylaw. That much I do know. Okay. But I don't have that instant memory. And I can't even find the final agreement somewhere. I have it, I think, somewhere. But the problem, it's like a 40-page document. Yeah, but the trouble, or the thing is if the bylaw is not correct, it's not your problem, it's not my problem. It's a district problem.
Lindsay was involved, I think?
Lindsay Parcells.
Yeah, so I'll just, before I cut the check, I'll just give them He'll give me the background. None of us have the history. None of us were involved.
No, that's the problem with it.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'd like to get back into our committee of the whole discussion, please. Okay, if we could just have the slide up, please. Actually, the one that I'm looking for was where there were the 17 items, and then there were, or actually, if you could go back just one. Okay, so the reason why I wanted this raised is that I can see where several of the items sort of connect back into one theme from the public, but then there's items raised by the public that haven't been raised by council, and that I don't think doesn't mean that we don't regard them as important. Sometimes it can be just the mindset of where you're at the time. And so what would happen to those items? Because I think they all belong with the other 17. But I think you want to make the list smaller, and now let's make it all bigger, but because those are all very important items.
I think, is it okay if I answer?
Yeah, go ahead,
Worship?
please.
Thank you. My response to that would be that all of those items belong in the OCP, even though they weren't touched on in our individual meetings necessarily. They were touched on, they may have been touched on, but not by the majority of people at that particular time. And so by no means are, just because they're not there, that they shouldn't be addressed. I agree entirely. So they will be. I do have a lot of information already from the public on them. Okay. So there's no shortage. And at some point, definitely your feedback will be required for the details of the policies attached to those.
Okay. So in terms of tonight and having a round table, this is a bit of a rigid environment to have that kind of a conversation. But what sort of outcomes were you looking for from us? I guess I'm just trying to think of what is it that you're needing from us with these 17 items?
Well, I think we're looking for some of the key policy directions that are important to you, because I do have a number that have come from the public engagement process, and I think ultimately the trying to be as simple as possible, the revised plan will be bringing those together and trying to accomplish as much as we can. Sorry, everyone over there. So they'll be. It's going to have to hopefully be a very broad document that is specific at the same time. So I hope that I'm doing my best to just make sure that we cross-tabulate everything from the public. A lot of the information that's in the existing plan is still very valid, so we would use that. Looking at some of the external documents that we are, other internal documents that we have, as well as references and the referral information that comes in from other agencies. So there'll be a lot to go in there, and just because we haven't had the opportunity to work with council uniquely, this is what this process right now is about, just to sort of have their input as elected representatives, and on the process from that perspective.
Okay, so maybe does council want to stay on this slide or go to the next slide? We'll go to the next one, please. Okay. All right. Okay, so we have a comment on the last one. So Councillor Ray then, and then Casper, you had some comments? Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in the last slide, there was a public comment on safety and ecosystems, and I believe that those would actually fall within the council's recommendations. Thank you. Safety can go in any number of those in terms of even land use designations, the same with ecosystems. So I think really there is a pretty close, other than really the food one, and I'm sure you could fit it in there somewhere. So I'm not overly worried about missing any. They're there.
Okay, Councillor Casper.
Well, and this is no disrespect to the authors of our current plan, but Just in the past 7 years, I think many of us have witnessed the contradictions contained in the current plan, which have created less clarity than what there should be in the plan. I took the liberty of actually writing our planner because I felt that my views should in fact be in writing so that there's no ifs, ands, or abouts or doubts about what I have to say in regard to the document. I'm going to focus on one of the goals of our strategic plan, and that is to simplify the planning process. And the reason I'm going to state that is because our current plan is riddled with so many items which are policy related, items that relate to initiatives and implementation. There's close to 900 separate line items on what could be viewed as dictating to this council or future councils as to what should in fact be done in regard to the running of the municipality, covering a wide range of issues, most of which, in my opinion, will never be implemented because of a number of factors: cost, political will, even will from the community. And these are the kind of things that I know that our planner has identified that unless we're sure that there are items in the document that will in fact be implemented, then you shouldn't even have them in the document. And when you look at the legislation provincially, this council and future councils are not legally bound to implement any plan or part of this document that subscribes to spending, infrastructure, or any other item that is being discussed in the document that is outside general land use provisions. Our lawyers have said on numerous occasions throughout the years that we all have to make sure that our land use plans and our zoning bylaws are not in a collision course, and they actually go together and are hand in hand. And I'm of the view that if we're going to go down this path in making changes, that we keep in mind how we can make the document simpler, more user-friendly as far as reading and understanding, so that we don't get actually 2 or 3 separate answers to a question that may be raised, because there could be 3 separate answers on the same subject in the document. And it all depends which direction you want to go. Well, let's pull this answer out. And then if you want to go this way, a 180 in opposite direction, well, it says this in the community plan. So in my mind, those are contradictions that have to be eliminated. The other thing that I think has to be stressed is how we can deal with the huge conflicts that have arisen. And I'm not going to mention what we talked about earlier on in the meeting, but it's the collision with the Agricultural Land Commission in regard to the ALR land designations for this technical industrial, which was adamantly opposed by the Land Commission. I think they were absolutely flabbergasted by the fact that the council of the day passed a bylaw that didn't have their blessing or approval, because it should never have been in that designation, should never have been there in the first place. The other thing that I see that is problematic is our erosion of industrial lands, in particular in the Kaltass and Idlemore area, by this sort of star circle designation of residential type development there. And I think any person, who understands the whole issue of land remediation on industrial land sites could clearly see that there's really little or no financial incentive for that to happen. In 7 years, there's been nothing done. If anything, we've spent time. If somebody wants to do something with their industrial land, we've had to actually make amendments to the official community plan in order for them to do it, which to me seems totally contradictory to the market and what people are actually wanting to do with their industrial land. So those are some issues that I think we have to seriously tackle, because they don't reflect market conditions, and they don't reflect, what's actually needed in the community. And I don't know why anybody would want to erode already zoned industrial land and change that, and then turn around and decide, let's put industrial land on ALR. Like, what a contradiction. But, the people of the day made that decision, but it's obvious that it hasn't worked. And I think that's been demonstrated by the position that Land Commission has taken, that they didn't sign off on their document. I want to applaud our planner for the effort that's been put into this, because it's a fresh set of eyes on this plan. And I'm sure all of us around the table in the past 6 years have seen that, for example, there was all kinds of vision about doing stuff in the town center, namely, we want to create this artist road and artist way. Well, the marketplace, those who own property and those who want to make investments in the community, clearly didn't see it that way. So what did we have to do? We had to amend the community plan in order to allow the development that the marketplace thought should happen. So to me, those are the kind of issues and examples where we should keep in mind as to what are we doing to provide the needs of affordable housing, to make sure that we have enough land in place for housing, because those are requirements of the community plan. We're also obligated to take steps and measures to reduce our carbon footprint and greenhouse gas emissions, those types of things. I think we can all agree to do that, but I also think that we should do it in a way where we're not making exorbitant claims and suggestions that are going to cost the taxpayers locally a fortune. And I know that's a tough nut to crack, but really, we're at a point now where we've managed to reduce almost 100 pages, right? And I, do applaud our planner for going through that exercise. We've made the current draft 100 pages smaller, and I don't think it's really changed the principles that are inherent in the plan. But there's still more work, in my opinion, to be done to make it even simpler. You can still have good, solid principles and vision in the community, but you don't have to have a lot of verbiage to make that happen. So, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Councillor Casper. Councillor Pearson.
First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Rice for her hard work and dedication in putting this to this point, because when I look at the draft key principles from the public and the council, it's actually very nice to see that they are very similar in themes. The big one for me is leadership from the OCP. We had a recommendation somewhere along the line. It was a 5-page letter from our solicitor recommending that what we take out of our OCP, and as long as we're still keeping that alive and well, to get rid of those collisions that Councillor Casper's talked about, and I won't go there too much, but leadership from the OCP. And it means that, for me, is this old document here has lots of leadership, but has leadership for anybody that wants to choose their position. So for me, is the clarity that comes out of our OCP is critical, so that somebody who's for a project or against it could look at it and make an informed decision, not using it either side. And that's what we've seen, and Councillor Casper touched on that just a minute ago. So critical for me, item number one should be leadership from the OCP and in our guiding document, and that the members of the public can see why and where we're going a certain direction, and why and where they want to go that direction. So it's a two-part thing. The other part is that I think leadership for me is the leadership on the public side should almost have a link to, and I don't know if it does, to planning tools. And I'm not sure what you meant by planning tools, but for me is the streamlining of the processes from the public side of things. So that's and you know that was one of my, and I'll say that was one of my hot buttons. Councillor Casper put his in writing, and I said them a lot. So the piece of planning, so that the public has confidence that the planning process is streamlined, that there's a finite amount of time that's associated with any process, given that the conditions are met, and that the document from the other side, the leadership piece, matches that with zoning, so that people can look at the OCP and have a reasonable expectation of where the community wants to go in from a development point of view. So those are critical for me. Sewer infill versus expansion. Always a very, very big hot button for me is that, we have lots of available land in our sewer area that the sewer is surrounding. So, that should be a very big priority for us before we start, borrowing money to go down into areas where there is no sewer. Given that, our last reports have always showed us that we're making great steps towards cleaning up the ocean. It could always get better. But again, I think if you're going to use development, use the tools that are available to you. The structure of the OCP, which is the fourth most important piece for me, is that it shows you in black and white where we're going, right? So that I could pick it up and go, okay, well, no, that application is contrary. I don't think we should be amending our OCP at every single application. I think it should be a guiding document that gives us that notion, because currently it's so ambiguous, and I think Councillor Casper touched on it extremely well. I could pick it up and then, so what's council's of the day's pleasure and staff? Okay, well, this is going to require an amendment to the OCP. That just becomes another thing that you do. Well, that's really counterintuitive to what an OCP should be. Oh, so we just have to get an amendment to the OCP. That, to me, is the wrong thing to say. Because that's, and I've heard it now for, I think, 5 years in a row. Oh, this is going to require an OCP amendment. So it's just another thing, another tick box. Well, that shouldn't be part of the planning process. It's contrary to the OCP, and it should come back to a public hearing. That should be very, very clear in the structure of that OCP. So, again, those are the highlights for me. Obviously, the public design, connectivity, all of that. I think walkability, mobility, I think that has to be incorporated into any applications that are in our downtown. Again, those are the highlights for me. So really, I hope I've kind of given you some more things to think about, and hopefully those themes come through. I wanted to capitalize on what Councillor Casper said. Shorter, but similar themes. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Berger, please.
Yes, thank you. I actually had quite a long meeting with Ms. Rice, and it was really refreshing to see the energy that she has put into this document and the passion that she had going forward. So I really appreciate all the work that you've done. And just to give other councillors sort of a recap of the discussion that Ms. Rice and I had, similar to what fellow councillors have already said, for me, our current OCP, it's projected to go 50 years. And for me, that's too long. There's too many action items. Too many policies. Unfortunately, our current OCP, in my view, we're over-promising and under-delivering. Because if we're looking that big of scale, how are we ever going to get anywhere? And as other councillors have said, we've already had to do amendments and adjustments. I think currently we've got restrictive zones. I think that they're hindering Souk's development. I think that in some cases we're even hindering Souk's economic prosperity within some of our zones. So for me going forward, I would love to see it simplified. I'd love to see a more clear vision. On the next page, number 6 and number 5 are big with me, and that has to do with the development of our community and neighborhood lens. Ms. Rice and I spoke a lot about the word neighborhood lens. And for me, my hope for the OCP would be to create a document that gives a more clear, attainable vision of what our neighborhoods would look like. For example, what zones would be appropriate in what areas. Creating development permit areas, which would help streamline our building process. If we had an idea of what we saw the Broomhill subdivision looking like, and if we could create a walkable area within there with maybe some small commercial, So neighborhoods are more vibrant, and there's somewhere for people to get out of the house and walk to. Almost like, I always want to use the term square. In different places I've lived throughout the States, I'll go back to Boston when I lived in Massachusetts. Almost all of the towns there, whether they're large or small, they all had a square. So you would, say the town name and you go to that square. But really, it's just maybe maybe a neighborhood pub, maybe a convenience store, a small place where you can just grab milk rather than going to the main grocery store. Somewhere where neighborhoods are more vibrant and people can walk to get what they need, and you really feel inclusive to that neighborhood rather than everyone depending on their car to go to the big store to pick up what they need. So that's sort of the neighborhood lens part that we talked about, and what each neighborhood could look like and how everyone could be more attached to their neighbors rather than so car dependent to get downtown. The land use designations were pretty big for me too. I think what we're doing right now is we're hindering our growth by nobody knows what our clear vision is. Because we have a document that's projected 50 years, if any developer, big or small, comes to Souk, they have to come into the district office to say, okay, what do you think about this in this neighborhood? Our document doesn't lay out, here's our vision for Broomhill, here's our vision for the Sun River area, here's our vision for the Casinos area. We don't really have a clear vision because it's so far-reaching. As Councillor Casper said, we're also hindering our industrial and some of our commercial zones. I think that we've got so many uses within the OCP and even our zoning bylaw. They're very broad, but yet they can also be restrictive because they're too poignant. So for me, it's really just simplifying and a really clear vision of what we'd like, maybe in a shorter term. Not 50 years, it doesn't make sense to me.
Councillor Ray?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and again, thank you to Ms. Rice for all the work that's gone into the document. I think pretty well much of what I said to Ms. Rice has also already been said. I think for me, the big thing in terms of that overarching document, I really think that when you become prescriptive, which is what I feel this current OCP is, where you outline all of like some of them have like 20 points underneath them. I think that's what ties the hands, and that's what creates the conflict, is people interpret things differently. And so for myself, as Councillor Casper said, I think that we don't want to get into the weeds. What we want to do is to have general guidelines so that future council's hands aren't tied. But the big thing for me in terms of vision is the way the South Island is growing and what is happening in Souk is we're moving, I think, more from a bedroom community to a very solid community. And when you do that, you've got to start planning and making sure that you can provide the commercial and the industrial lands. And I was having a conversation a couple of years ago about the current OCP when we were talking about the waste management transfer opportunities. And the person said to me, oh, well, we'll worry about those later. And that wasn't staff, by the way. No, we can't worry about that stuff later. Those are the things, we may not need it today. Well, actually, we do need that today. But when you look to bigger communities, what are some of the key pieces that to plan for in the future as the area develops? Because there is a feeling of not in my backyard. And there's going to be some tough decisions that are going to have to be done when it comes to providing the necessary industrial lands and commercial lands for the community to grow economically. And I think it's important that we do grow economically because that is what will enable people to live, work, and play in our community. So for me, I think, as it's already been mentioned, I think one of the challenges we are going to have is around the agricultural land reserve and what is designated right within the middle of our community as it is now developing and growing. And how does that play a role in the future? We can't be all residential when we're growing in the way we are growing. So I agree. I think there has to be some flexibility to the OCP, and I think you find that when you're not as prescriptive. And I do believe that the marketplace will determine the development, and we need to have a very good vision for what that could support. So I think I'm pretty well in agreement with most of what everybody else already said.
Okay. Thank you, Council, and thank you, Ms. Rice, for all of your work on this. What I appreciate is just your high-level bullets, how the language of how you're able to take so many different perspectives and to shape them into one or two bullets that are very high level but well worded, and then of course all the infographics that go with all the various pieces that you've done throughout. I think they're excellent for conversation starters or to have a dialogue on something. They're very well done. Touching on what Council said, I mean, when someone asks me, well, what is the purpose of an OCP? For myself, it's looking at what we're required to have through the Local Government Act, but also a vision for, say, 10, 20 years out. I think Council and their strategic plan can set what you want to accomplish over the short term, the term being 4 years, but having a guiding document that shapes what we strive to do, and also long term for the finance piece. The challenge I feel, and much of what Council has already said, is within our existing OCP is there's just so much language in it that it's caused and hampered and has put restrictions on some development from happening, or you keep hearing, oh, this is contravening the OCP, but in some cases it just might not be practical. Other cases, it's just too specific. So an example in here, there's a few places where we should strive to use LED lighting. Well, that's sort of becoming the norm now, and as other types of lighting are being phased out, they're not really an option. But that language is in here, or the specifics around LEED development, whereas now there's many types of LEED equivalent or built green, and I don't even know that LEED as it was exists anymore. And also even the reality, I was thinking a lot about the tech park, and when you look at how that sector is evolving, where it's being successful in Victoria, and Dan Gunn came out to Souk a while back. That industry doesn't want to be in one specific location. They like to be downtown in a variety of different places, using a variety of different office space. I think the challenge that Souk has is that this is a younger demographic, and we just, in talking to some people in this sector, they don't want to live here because the nightlife, the coffee, you can go at 10 o'clock, like there's just more, it's what you want to find in a city. But they've all said when we're married and we have children and a dog, Souk is where we'd like to be because of all the outdoor recreation that Souk has to offer. And we are seeing that now, where many people in IT are now able to work from home. So we're seeing that develop, or they've taken a suite and made it into a large home office, and we're seeing home businesses develop as a result. And these are people that are older, I mean, still much younger than I, but are finding Souk attractive for that reason. But to establish the tech park as it's defining here is just old language for a very modern, evolving industry. And it's going to continue to evolve, so defining it doesn't make sense, because it's just, like the iPad didn't exist when we did our last OCP, and who knows what type of technology will exist when the new OCP comes out. This is old now. And that's why those sorts of things we just don't want to have too defined. There's also things, I'm thinking of a business that developed a second business, Pure Elements in the Artisan's Garden, doing everything in accordance, but then had many different hoops to go through, challenges, what about parking and fencing and all those things. And here's a business that's following the guidelines within the OCP, and it should have been, in that case, an easy process, and it wasn't. So that, I think, is where things can just be a bit too specific. I think there's great ideas in here. One thing that I was thinking about when we looked at the last OCP, I asked the question, where's the heart of our community? I was thinking, because I came back from a trip abroad where you could see some places had an actual physical sculpture of a heart. This is the heart. This is the main place of the community. And I've received many different answers since then, and I guess it's my quest, where is the heart of Souk? Because everyone would have a different answer. Some would refer to the loggers pole as it was. And then many people like, oh, you go down to the flats for that, because we've had so many new folks come in and they've seen it there. So that's where the central gathering place is, even though once upon a time it was in our town. Others will describe the Legion as the main gathering place because that's where the community hall is. So that's something that continually changes, and it's something to think about in terms of what it is. I mean, I think always, I guess one of my favorite Christmas, The Grinch That Stole Christmas, and the tree was gone, but all the Who's still gathered in the same place because they knew that that's where the heart of their community was. It's a bit simple, but I think as we become a more complete town, it's an important piece to think about. I agree with Councillor Ray in terms of how we handle waste, recycling, all those pieces of living have to be handled in some way. And then we ran into a collision with that in the past. Medical services are another piece, and I see that that's already been touched on in one of the goals around embracing community and the like. But it is a missing piece in terms of meeting residents' needs and economic development. In terms of what's on the screen here, some of the things, when I look at partnerships or asset management, those almost seems like more of council strategic plan or staff work plan than an OCP piece. Like asset management, yes, it's something that we have to do and staff is working on now, and where appropriate we would form partnerships to carry out objectives. So that's sort of how I read that. Some of the other ones, there was one piece on housing forum. As we create more local employment, there's a need for workforce housing here, and that's something now, like where do people, if we open up new cafes or restaurants, where do the staff live, and where do they work? Are they expected to rent? Is there's so many programs on tiny homes now, or how do younger people get into the market on their own, and how do we address that? So that's sort of an affordable housing piece that I see there. And some of the other things is just planning tools. Again, sort of feel like they should meet more council strategic plan in a sense. But that's just because I'm reading the bullet. I don't have the full dialogue or conversation as to what the background was. Sewer infill is a conversation that council needs to have. Should we look at expanding? It's a 2-year window that would need to start. So where I think that's a broader conversation to have with the community. Where do we expand? How far does it go? And how do we start preparing for that? Because then, of course, the finance has to be in place as well. Efficient infrastructure, to me, sounds like a smart growth principle, so using your density in the most wisest way. But that's where I'm just giving the feedback on what I see here. But I do appreciate what other councillors said just in terms of thinning down the document so that it's not so restrictive. I think as we're growing as a community, we also, and evolving as a district, rely on staff expertise to provide those policy pieces or the more specific with each report that comes and each application that comes forward for things to think about. But otherwise, as I look at this, I'm like, you look back over the 7 years, I don't know that I could give us a good rating on how we've done here, because there's so many things that we should have done and haven't done. So one of them is even there should be covered bike racks. I can't think of one, a covered bike rack that's been installed anywhere in a public place in Souk. Yeah, a covered one, but that's what it says. We have one sort of out front of actually we do have one at the district office that's sort of covered by the building, but the bike rack itself isn't covered. But again, it's something that's needed, because I hear from some residents as and this is interesting, it's come out as we've put 2-hour parking in certain places, on the understanding that people are parking and riding into Victoria. What I'm hearing now is that those people actually work in Souk and they have nowhere to park. And have you thought about taking your bicycle? There's nowhere to safely lock it up. So never mind covered, it should be secure bike parking at a minimum, and We don't have one in here yet, and nothing in the town center either. So those sorts of things we're not accomplishing what we set out to do in this document. Yeah, I'll open it back to other councils. Councillor Ray, then Casper. It is a round table after.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think one of the, and I don't know if this is the appropriate place or the time to ask, but I would also be interested in hearing from the planner, Ms. Rice, at some point in time. You've had so much information coming into you. You're the professional. I would at some point like to have some comment back to us in terms of, from a planner's perspective, how these integrate, in terms of your experience here in Souk, looking at the old OCP and where we're going. Is there some priorities that we might, because if it's a high-level document, you can give some priorities to some things. You don't tell them how it's to be done, but to sort of give us some feedback, because I'm not a planner. So it would be good for me to have information so I can make an informed decision as we get closer to the end of this document without having you write the whole thing and then us go, oh, well, what are your thoughts? So I'm not quite sure, Your Worship, at what point that, I wouldn't expect it to be tonight. I think that might catch Ms. Rice off guard, but I put it out there anyhow.
I think Mr. Howitt can reply to that.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Ray, I think that's a very good idea, but I would like to have, as we go through this process, obviously this is not the appropriate place to have that kind of dialogue, but what I would like to have is Ms. Rice canvass the other planners in our office who are have a little more history in Souk and the problems that have occurred with the existing OCP, and perhaps not the next time we bring it forward, but the time after that, as we get closer to the end, is we bring our experiences and our problems forward and give you some sense and some idea of what we go through in dealing with this OCP.
Thank you, Mr. Howitt. And I think that's important because that's the part that informs us, in terms of understanding what the challenges are. I think in the OCP I can understand when you look at it, people had some really good ideas, but good ideas don't always translate on the ground to be able to be actually done realistically. And as the mayor has pointed out, there's a number of things. There was so much in that OCP. I don't know if you could really have got it done in 50 years. I think it would be important. So thank you very much.
Councillor Casper, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm just going to go back to what I had written, just as a friendly reminder, that there's 900 combined goals, objectives, policies, and action items listed in the current plan. And that covers all the different categories. In one category, I'm recollecting there were actually a combination of 45 specific things that could or could not be done or should be done. And to me, it just seemed like a huge maze. And in my mind, it kind of creates confusion for anybody, especially someone who isn't in the development industry or someone who really doesn't fully comprehend basic land use designations and that. And, it's hard enough just getting to that stage, but then to have all the other stuff sort of dumped on one really makes the system get bogged down. There's something I didn't touch on, and I know it's referenced in the last page of the report that the committee has, and that's the section that deals with the regional growth strategy.
Yes.
So I think it's critical that based on the numerous opinions that I've seen from court cases and what our lawyer has indicated, that we have to keep that in its simplest form so that we don't let the CRD's document dictate over our community what we have or do within our community plan. Because the courts have already ruled that it's local government that is 100% responsible for what's contained within their community plan unless it's designated or mandated by the province. So I think we've got to get rid of a lot of the stuff that isn't necessary, and if need be, we should go to our lawyer to actually get maybe some additional guidance on that, if need be. Because I don't want to see us caught in a position where we may want, or a future council may want, to go down a certain path to do something relating to land use, and suddenly be told by the Capital Regional District we can't do it. As was the case in Central Saanich, it went to court, and Central Saanich lost because of the wording that they had within their official community plan. And because it referenced all these things that were contained in the regional growth strategy that they adopted in their community plan, that tied their hands. And if we can get rid of some of that stuff, then I think that's in our interest. Talking the community's interest, not just as councils, but the community. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks for raising that. There are some matters pertaining that go on longer than a council term, that are always a work in progress, working with the MOTI, school district, and then with the CRD and our desire to have water extended throughout the boundaries. I mean, those are things that have to stay in. But as you raise the CRD, in terms of the regional growth strategy being in an arbitration process, where does that put ROCP in terms of having it signed off?
At this point, I'm not really sure
Yeah.
what that does to our ROCP in generalistic terms, but I know we have to have a comment or a statement within the OCP itself which acknowledges the RGS. I think it was a year or two ago where we did ask our legal counsel to determine if the statement that was in our existing OCP is going to bind us with regards to the RGS and whatever the and whatever they want. Now that there may be fallout with regards to the mediation within the RGS, I think it will be incumbent upon us to go back to our legal counsel and just make sure whatever statement we make in the OCP is reflective of certainly what we want to do and isn't going to hinder us as we move forward. But I don't know what kind of a concrete answer, a solidified answer we're going to get when it's in mediation, but we will pose the question before we move forward.
So that would be the regional context statement.
That's
correct.
correct.
In some cases,
Yeah.
it may even be the same still. Okay. Councillor Pearson.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Casper, for pointing that out, because that was my next statement with the RGS. I think that it's absolutely critical that we take out any ambiguous language around where we want water to go. We had an application turned down recently to go up Otter Point Road because our OCPC didn't identify those lands for development. They use it both ways, and that was by the one if you go water. And that wasn't even to do with the CRD. That was the water. So we need to really clearly identify that we want water to go to every single property without anything on it in our OCP. Right? Because water's becoming shortage, although we haven't seen it this year. But we've seen changes in aquifers because of other people drilling into them and things like that. So that's something. The other thing that I want to comment on is things like the industrial lands. I think that clarity around or the communication piece, and I think it's for all current designations, is shared with the adjacent landowners in a public document. And hopefully they take time to buy that, buy the OCP when they buy their new property, or they look at the OCP. Because one of the things that I see is, as Councillor Casper talked about in his first discussion in this roundtable, was the lands around Kaltassin. Well, those have been industrial for a historical amount of time. They're legacy industrial lands. And if you think about it from a planner's point of view is, the main supply comes from Victoria, drops off at maybe smaller warehouses, and then our local economy can access those lands. And you're not traveling through our downtown or our nice downtown with industrial-sized trucks. So it comes to outside of our town, and those should be preserved. But in that preservation, there should be communication to the community around there. That's got to be part of our OCP. For me, that's critical, because the people will, as soon as you make an application to change a wording in what's currently industrial land, in a current zoning. And we've seen where we've wanted to add one category to industrial lands in their current zoning, C2 or C3 or whatever. Then all of a sudden the public says, well, I'm surprised that this use would be happening. So I think we need to really identify this is industrial land for to the mayor's point, that 10, 20 years, we see this as industrial land. Because those are those controversial pieces of property. And, we've had some applications for those lands, and it's always the last property in the industrial that comes up with the most controversy. Because there's a border from industrial to residential, and that's always that most controversial. Anyways, that's something else I'd like to see.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ray, please.
Thank you. And just along the same lines, and I think part of what I found in the OCP, the previous one, was, and I spoke about it being realistic before, and in terms of those Kaltassin lands, that was all designated to be residential in the future. And so realistically, without a phenomenal amount of cost. And so I come back to my comments earlier about, the land use and the growth in the future. It has to be realistic in terms of looking at, because, when it comes to things like industrial lands, whether it's the soft or the heavy, a lot of the times people say, well, I don't want to see that in my backyard. But as Souk grows, there's going to be a necessity for those things. And I think we need to be realistic when we're looking at properties to have some vision as to why it would support it going there other than elsewhere. Because I think when people come to Souk to look for property, I think there needs to be a good... we need to be able to communicate to them what the vision is in the future so that people, when they come to buy property, can make informed decisions on what they're buying.
Okay, thank you, members of council. I would like to open up the microphone to any members of the public that would like to make any comment on our discussion about the official community plan. Okay, if you come forward, Mr. Dugan, we just need you to turn on the microphone, please.
I'm only coming in on this, my name is, did I tell my name? James Duggan, 6744 Air Road. Just addressing Ms. Rice. Coming in on this for the first time. I didn't know that this was going on. But there's one thing I noticed, I might be wrong, correct me if I am, but there doesn't seem to be anything mentioned about, we'll say, ways of developing young children, for example, as being our future leaders, which I think is really important. And they need to have certain tools for developing their ways of interacting with the world, basically. It's called inner engineering, actually. And it's to do with raising their levels of consciousness, which I think, if you're talking about, the future of the future of humanity, is one of the primary things. Actually, the most important thing is to raise the levels of consciousness. So, and every community would have the responsibility of addressing that, how to do it. Because it's like, making unconscious decisions is, you end up spending $70,000 on artificial turf, for example. So, so that's I don't know what else to say about it, except it just seems to be missing, you know? Somewhere where we look at what we need to do for young children. Because, you know, and I know that do I have a time limit here?
Reasonably.
Yeah, okay. I won't go on because I could. But I don't want to harp on this too much. But I keep harping on it because I've been on revitalized water for a year. I started to revitalize my water because I started looking into it. And I noticed that it actually affected my consciousness. Getting back to consciousness, you see. And I have done a lot of research in the last little while. And I can almost direct you to certain places on the internet where you can find out that water is dead. And if it isn't, you know, I mean, for water to be drinking water that's dead is not going to impart anything into a living system, such as our bodies. So it needs to be alive, number one. And children need to be drinking good water, number two. When you give children real water, they'll just love it. They'll keep drinking it. And I think they should have fountains in every school here where kids can go up and get revitalized water out of the fountain in the schoolyard. You'll see them. They'll all be lapping it up. And it's not hard to do. It certainly won't cost you $70,000. So I really think, you know, we need to get to this making consciousness one of the priority in any community. And if you want to know more about it, I'd be happy to. I would really like to have a time actually to sit down and dialogue with you somewhere. One-on-one. I don't want to do it with everybody. Okay? I've got lots of good ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dugan. Other members of the public, welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Council. I appreciate this opportunity. Loretta Deutscher, 7026 Wright Road. I noticed on the previous slide that there was food and safety. And I just noticed, as a person who's living in Souk, the number of people who are starting community gardens. They're growing up all over our community. So wondering about when that survey was done and the public's comments, I think food ties into a lot of those topics that we see on the present page. And the same with safety. There are many emergency planning groups and different groups, and I think they fit very nicely into that. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much for the comments.
Hi, it's Britt Santowski from 2206 Church Road. I'm putting on a different hat now. I'm speaking as a member of the community. And as you know, I've been following council for about 2 years. And I'm learning a lot. This document to me seems incredibly important. And I feel like I'm just coming into the importance of this document. I really liked what Councillor Berger had to say about us having a vision of neighborhood squares, and and kind of having in our head what it looks like. And I think that that's really been lacking in Souk. We're a seaside town without a seaside view. That to me is number one. It's not a very attractive town. When I've heard mention of Souk in national media, it's usually about the treasures that can be found in the offshoots, right? So when you go away from the downtown core, I do think the long term is incredibly important, seeing 50 years down the road and anticipating what it looks like. There are certain things I think we can plan for. One is the influx of seniors. Vancouver Island is a finite landmass, and Vancouver Island, the west coast, is kind of Canada's California, so it's where people are going to come to retire. So we can see a certain demographic coming in. There's a certain amount of planning that can be done for that. Things like hospitals, infrastructure, roads, these are things that we can see a growing need for. I think it's really cool. This document is really important, and I'm just learning right here, right now, how important that document is. I know about this much of that much that needs to be done in it, and thank you. It's great work. Looking forward to it.
Thank you very much for the feedback and your comments.
(3118C) Outer Point Road. I think some of the issues that I had with the old one were discretionary powers that are offered up when you look at all the policies that are involved in every page and so on. And it gives staff discretionary powers that aren't consistent. So when you come forward with these applications and you do different things, some applications are asked for stuff on page 9, some are asked for stuff on page 12, and they were never consistent. You show on the new one, it talks about partnership, talks about sewer infill, land use designations, town center design, walkability, housing form, so on. So in this new one, if we want buy-in from the development community, you have to make the process reasonable. You have to make it so it's not onerous, it doesn't take too long. So, I mean, realistically, this OCP already talks about land use designations and expectations, and we had a town center plan that we did some time ago, and we had our OCP, and it mapped out what we expected out of our town center, expected out of community growth area, gateway, residential area, and then suburban, urban, so on. In this case here, so if somebody coming in with an application to build in our downtown, they shouldn't have to go through this onerous process of telling you what you've already told staff that we're interested in over a period of time. So we've already done transportation master plans, we've done liquid waste management plans, we've already done all these things, and then a guy comes forward with an application to do infill in the downtown, include in the sewer area, so on and so forth, and then we start asking for all these studies to be done, which we already know the answers to. So all that does is make onerous cost commitments to the persons or persons doing the applications and the application process for no reason at all. We've done transportation plans, and we've done transportation studies, and we've done everything you can possibly know, especially with our town center. But yet every time an application comes forward, we're going to ask for another transportation plan just to talk about the exact same issue we've already talked about in the last dozen applications. And if we want our town center to grow, we want it to be the focal point and the place where we do want growth or whatever, we've already pretty much taken care of all that. You take away the guesswork by doing these transportation master plans and these town center plans, and then you guys come up with a revitalization program for downtown for tax exemptions and so on, if people build in the downtown and build the things you want in the downtown and so on. And then when applications come forward, we're asked for all these onerous conditions to get zoning. I understand that when you get to the servicing component, there's a whole bunch of expectations for stormwater management, for sewer inclusion, all these things. Which totally should be accepted. But on the zoning part, we create our zoning bylaw and we say this is what we're looking for, more density. We have a housing condition going on in Vancouver and lower, all over Vancouver Island. And we have no way of making this happen in any reasonable amount of time if we got all these huge conditions on rezoning to get to the point where we can actually start putting shovels in the ground and building stuff. So there's there's a real commitment here in this OCP to have engagement with staff and council to understand what direction we're going and what we're expecting out of this process. And adding more layers and layers and layers on top of this rezoning process isn't going to get the commitment from the development community to get housing done and affordable housing and small housing, as you've talked about, if this is the case. So I think that's a big component here, and that message needs to be passed on. You guys had your strategic plan here in 2016, and you specifically said you're streamlining the planning process. And every time I come forward with an application, the planning process is not streamlined. In fact, it's the polar opposite of streamlined. I'm expected to do all these things that are just redundant, that we've already done over and over again in the past. And I'd like to see that process. I'd like to see better communication. I'd like to see this partnership thing. You got in the number one thing. If that's going to be the number one goal, let's make it a number one priority. Partnership means both people come to the table and you come to a conclusion of how we're going to get things done, instead of hitting brick walls every time I come forward with another client and another application process. So, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haldane. Councillor Ray?
Just a quick comment. I think one of the things that occurs is that staff are only enforcing what our bylaws are. And so I think as we move forward with this OCP, I think the points that Mr. Haldane made are legitimate. One of the things I've always wondered is there's so much property. Like when I first arrived in Souk, there was so much property, I couldn't understand how all that waterfront property wasn't developed yet. So there's something, there's some mechanisms that are getting in the way to move forward, and this OCP I think will help. But I think we need to look at some of the bylaws and just see what are we expecting in terms of development. Because if it's not in a developer's best financial interest, they won't build here. And I think if we want to see some sustainable growth and have the commercial and the industrial, I think we need to look at our policies to see if we're creating barriers to making us economically viable.
Yep, no, that's true. Our staff have put together a work plan outlining a whole number of policies, what we don't have, what's dated and needs to be refreshed, all based on feedback that our CAO has done with review and with staff coming in. So it's just the case council needs, we're going to have a lot of work to do, but it's essential because for this part of the conversation, it is hindering. It's causing problems, and it's making life difficult for staff as well as the development community. I don't think it's just pain on one side of the table here. It's probably on both, and that's up to us. We're hearing this feedback from both, and we need to resolve it. Is there anything else from members of the public here tonight? One more little thing, Mr. Dugan. Come on up. I'll just answer, though. You did make some comments about our children and our youth, and there was another area of the document that our planning staff have put together, and it talks about promoting the well-being of families, youth, and seniors, and then public education and prevention pieces, remembering our roots, and then there's some different pieces that does touch on the theme that you said earlier.
Right. Okay, just to keep consciousness in mind, right, as the reason why we do these things. So this morning I was going into town on the bus, and I was waiting for the bus to pull away, the 61, and another logging truck went by with trees that were not much thicker than this glass here. What about this? You know, they were all that size. And so I was wondering, because if we keep cutting down the trees, we're going to be dead. So, I mean, no, that's a fact. And so I was wondering if it would be possible to make a law, for Souk, to make a law where logging trucks couldn't come through here.
we have a provincial highway running through our town.
I know.
So that's...
But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you know, and we need to do something, you know. We got to stop this.
Well, in this case, this is where council can take on an advocacy role in
Yeah.
areas like this. Lands outside our jurisdiction or outside
I know,
our lands.
but
We
still,
could- we can
like
put a
we
tree
have to
cutting
put
bylaw on our own.
people have to
lands.
put our foot down, and as a town, we should be putting our foot down about it. It's deadly, you know. I mean, it's all over the world happening, but you can only act locally. So,
Thank you. Okay, at this point, Ms. Rice, we do have another, sorry, I'll call again for any comments from the public. Welcome back, Mr. Haldane.
Thank you. I guess one thing I'd like to touch on with my expectations, I guess, is that, and Councillor Ray pointed out the, you know, bylaws and so on. If you take your application process for your land that comes up on May 8th, and you look at the expectations for that to pass the zoning process, those are the same bylaws and the same rules that everybody follows, but discretionary means you can make up whatever you want based on language in the OCP, how things are written, and so on. So if you take your expectations on how your zoning comes through and use that as a template, I'd be more than willing to follow the exact same process the district is going to follow. And if that passes on to all the other land developers in Souk, that's obviously a fair process. You guys are going through a public process, and I'm pretty sure you're expecting that to be a fair, equal process. Then I don't think the development community would have a problem following the identical process that you guys are going through for your land. And in this case, all bylaws must be followed and passed and equal to, otherwise it would be illegal. So therefore, I'm saying to you, use that as your template. When I talked to Teresa about a month ago, she said that the development process for this piece of land would be the one she would be using in the future. But of course, she's not here right now. So I would expect maybe council could endorse some sort of proposition that would maybe be agreeable to the development community to cover the same land approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else from members of the public here this evening? Okay, thank you all for attending and for your comments. We certainly appreciate them. I'll just touch on what Ms. Santowski said. There is, when we get our new draft document, sort of a visualization or a vision statement in the beginning, and it sort of gives you that look ahead. And I think that's important, to look ahead 50 years, taking into context where Souk is now, where we think it's going to go. I think it's more when you get too specific in language, where it's defining a type of light bulb or a type of housing, then we're stuck. But in terms of looking 50 years out of sidewalks, things connecting, preserving a view corridor, those are all things taking into context climate change, how things are going to rise, our role within the CRD, water to our boundaries, the highways. Those are all transit things that are always a work in progress over the years and over time. And it's just the language that gets too detailed in the now when things are evolving constantly. But yeah, I certainly appreciate everyone's comments this evening. So just turning to staff now, at this point, there is a motion then, the suggested recommendation then, that committee recommends to council that the report dated May 1st entitled Official Community Plan Review Update be received for information. Was there anything further that you required from us, Ms. Rice? Do you have the feedback that you were hoping for from this roundtable?
Your Worship, we came tonight to get a sense of, beyond what the 17 items were, we came to get a sense of where council wanted to be. I myself, and I'm sure that Ms. Rice and Brent Blackhall, we now understand where you're headed. And what we would like to do with your guidance is we'll go away and we'll come up with a draft document and a draft land use plan and come back to council for further discussion and further direction. From that further direction, I'm sure that we will receive indication of what needs to be tweaked before we take it to the public. But after that, we need to take it to the public or to the community for the necessary public hearings and public input sessions, as well as our referral agencies. That is what I would like to see in the sense of a direction from council tonight.
Okay, so that's where then this recommendation suffices. You have what you need there. A question that I have in terms of public input, public engagement, what would that look like? Because I just find this sort of setting for that, I don't know if just to get more, can there be something held at the community hall that has mapping, some of the diagrams that are blown up larger to look at? Like, is that sort of what we're thinking, more of an open house, or was it just to have something in this sort of setting?
Your Worship, we're obligated by law to have community input, and I can't remember the number, if it's 1, 2 meetings or whatever, but we are obligated by law to have those community input meetings, and I envision having something at the community center where, like you say, we'll have the maps up on the wall, we'll have draft documents, etc. We'll have staff there to answer questions and receive input as it's offered.
Okay, and it would be good if you can to sort of do, sort of like I think the Talktober event, it wasn't just an evening, it sort of spanned the course of a day and an evening, and like if possible, I think that would work. Councillor Ray?
Thank you. And just in terms of the process, I'm hoping that we get staff's feedback into the document before we go to the public.
Yes, that's what Mr. Howard had said. They'll be working on a draft. It'll come back to council, and then we'll launch it back out into the public. But I would just like you to think about having some sort of an event at the community hall, because we would need to look at dates, their availability, who's available, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think we'll have, Your Worship, I think we'll have a better sense of that when we come back with the first draft, because it's such a variance from, or not a variance, but it's such a different, it's going to be such a different looking OCP that I would suggest that coming back once may not be sufficient. We may be back twice before we go to the public.
Okay, fair enough. I just want to see something more than this sort of a setting is what I'm getting at. Councillor Pearson?
And thank you for that through the chair. And I reiterate what the mayor said. So I have a couple of questions through the mayor to, I think to Mr. Howard actually first. So do I understand that Ms. Rice is the lead for this project going forward and up to this point?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Pearson, that's correct.
Okay, so, and I know that's kind of a technical question, I didn't need to frame it up there. What I heard you say something earlier about former planners and having input. One of the things I fear is legacy kind of content. I really appreciate that we have a new planner looking at this sort of differently, and that we get a new and improved look at the document, or a new document. And sometimes emotion, and I just want to say emotion hangs on to what we've always done in the past. And I think that this is our opportunity, because we're spending enormous amount of time and effort in this document. I don't want to lose sight of that it's a new person doing a new document, and I don't want it to be hangovers from the old documents. You kind of get where I'm going with that?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Pearson, I can't remember specifically what the context was, but I think Ms. Rice was asked from a planner's perspective what problems the existing OCP was creating. And all I was suggesting is the other planners that are here have been here a little bit longer, and they probably have a little bit more knowledge of some of the other problems or some of the nuances, and that's all I was getting at is combining them all.
So it was just sitting in there churning away. Sorry, through the chair to you. It was just sitting in there churning away, and I'm thinking, oh, that sounds like we're hanging too much onto the old OCP. This is a refresh. It's not a complete revamp of the OCP, but it's a new set of eyes, and I think it's absolutely going the perfect direction for me personally. Thank you.
Okay, anything else from council? Councillor Casper is moving the recommendation. Any further discussion then? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And looking then for a motion to adjourn tonight's committee of the whole, please. Moved by Councillor Pearson. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, good night, everyone.